Welcome to This Organized Life. If you're a mom, wife, or coffee lover seeking advice on how to reduce clutter and reclaim time, look no further than your host, Lori Palau, founder of Simply Be Organized and author of Hot Mess, a practical guide to getting organized. For a lot of people, clutter is their dirty little secret, but it doesn't have to be. Each week, we will share practical tips, chat with experts, and provide strategies on how to keep you organized. I hope that by sharing our stories, you feel a little less alone and more empowered to tackle the areas that are holding you back. So let's get started.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to today's episode of This Organized Life podcast. I am your host, Lori Palau, and I am stoked for today's guest because he's a personal friend of mine. He's a former guest on our show. And if you are new to our show, I'm going to strongly encourage you go back and listen. We're going to link to it in our show notes. It was episode 269. And it was all about leaving your legacy list. And it's, you know who I'm talking about. It's my friend, Matt Paxton. Now, if you don't know Matt, I'm going to give you a real top line overview, and then he's going to kind of come in and fill in the blanks. But if you're a fan of the show Hoarders, you might recognize Matt or recognize his voice if you're listening or watching on YouTube. And he's been on Hoarders for 12 years. And he also hosts the Emmy-nominated Legacy List with Matt Paxton. He's got a couple books out, Keep the Memories, Lose the Stuff, and The Secret Lives of Hoarders. I actually have to say, Keep the Memories, Lose the Stuff is one of my favorite books on decluttering and downsizing. And that is purely hand to God editorial. It's a great book. I strongly encourage all of you guys to go check it out. We'll also link to that in the show notes. But I asked Matt to come back on the show, not only because we have like great banter and people love his episode, but because I wanted to speak to the actual topic of hoarders. It's such a common thing that when I talk to people, oh, what do? You're a professional organizer. Oh my gosh, my fill in the blanks a hoarder, or I'm a hoarder. And people throw this word around, but there really is a distinction between people who are chronically disorganized, have hoarding disorders, and just people who are overwhelmed with stuff. And so I figured who better to talk about and really unpack this topic than Matt. So I'm super excited to sit down with him again. He's a very busy guy. So thank you so much, my good friend, Matt Paxton. Welcome back to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Of course. So
I got to say something before we get started.
Go ahead.
Couple things. One, I love this podcast. Obviously, I hadn't heard it much before I was on, and now I listen to it a lot in the car when I'm driving. It's a really good podcast. But what I want to talk about before we talk about hoarding, you had my wife on as a guest.
I did, and I meant to mention that in the intro, and I totally.
Well, no, she does not like being identified as my wife, right? Like we're partners, but like professionally, we're independent, and which I respect. But this was so funny. So like you and I talked, and you're like, where's the first place? What's the first place you think we should declutter? And I was like, oh, I love the junk drawer. That's where I start in the junk drawer. By the way, my wife and I completely disagree. And then you asked my wife the same question like 8 weeks later, and she's like, anywhere but the junk drawer. And like, I'm not allowed to be in the house when she's doing interviews, so I had no idea what she did. So I'm just listening to it raw, and I'm dying laughing because she's just like, I mean, who in the world would clean up a junk drawer first?
I wouldn't either. I have to say, I wouldn't either. I start in the bathroom. If I have somebody if somebody's like overwhelmed with clutter, that's where I recommend people starting, because it's kind of like a low emotional area. But that is if you're going to
cry over soap, we're in trouble, right? You're going to be on this episode, not
I was just going to say yes, and we also will link to the episode with Zoe Kim, who is Matt's wife.
It created about a 2-week conversation in our house. And we still disagree.
That is so funny. Yes, and as I continuously shamelessly plug the Paxton Kim family, I love following Zoe's Instagram handle, which is Raising Simple.
Raising Simple. Yeah, so for people listening, it basically, if you want to see where we live and see how clean our house actually is, follow us on Raising Simple. We do raise 7 kids as minimalists. We live in a 2,400 square foot home, 9 people. 2,400 square feet, 6 boys, 1 girl. We are running out of space, y'all.
Quickly. Yeah.
Quickly.
But I love everything about you guys. And that's why as soon as I said, you know what, I want to do this episode, you were absolutely the first. And I'm glad the last person.
Thank you. And I love it. So let's get to it. Hoarding. Let's talk
hoarding.
about it.
So, all right. It's like, it's the hot button word, especially in the world
in our industry.
or in our industry, organizing and decluttering. Can you just really unpack what truly makes up a hoarder? Like, what is the difference between hoarding and just somebody who's got a lot of stuff?
So take opinions out of it. This statement is a fact. Hoarding is a mental disorder marked by a significant need to acquire possessions. Right? That's the technical definition. What I'll dumb it down to is something bad has happened to people, and they're looking for happiness and self-worth in stuff. Right? Just like you or I might look for happiness and self-worth. Excuse me. Just like you and I might look for happiness and self-worth in exercise or faith or career or drugs or alcohol. I mean, and I'm going the gamut here on purpose. They're looking for happiness and self-worth. I mean, it's funny, 20 plus years ago, I had a small career in triathlon, right? The biking, running, and swimming. I was a big runner in college. And me and my 2 buddies started a triathlon wetsuit company. And we noticed traveling the country, like everybody in triathlon at that time, this was early 2001, everyone had just gotten divorced, right? Like everybody. And we were on this like spiritual journey in Hawaii. We had just done Ironman Hawaii. I didn't, my 2 buddies did. I was selling wetsuits. I'll never forget. We went and smoked a bunch of weed and we're in the rainforest. This is 20 years ago, so it's okay, y'all. And we're in there. And I remember this lady, she goes, "What are you running from?" I said, "What do you mean?" She goes, "Well, if you're running a marathon, you're running really far from something." It was this old hippie lady out in the rainforest. And that stuck with me the rest of my life, right? And so how does that connect to now with hoarding? Well, man, it took me 10 years of cleaning out hoarded houses to really, truly understand hoarders. And it's very similar to marathons. It's very similar to alcohol. Like we were running from something, right? Something bad happened. So the reason I'm telling that whole out is, look, when you're trying to understand a hoarder, you have to understand the trauma, because it's all about trauma. Mm-hmm. If you don't understand the trauma, there's no point in cleaning the house. And I mean, I started off, and I say this all the time, I'm on a TV show that puts a mental disorder on television for entertainment. There is an ethical issue from the start, right? We give them a year of therapy on the back end. If you don't do that therapy for the trauma, I think if one, it's unethical to clean the house, because we have 20 plus years of experience to show if you don't treat the trauma, it's going to come back 100% of the time. I mean, my career success rate is about 60 to 65% if they go to therapy. If they don't go to therapy, I'm 100% failure. Mm-hmm. Always comes back. So I can prove to you that if they don't get treated for that trauma, then there is 0 point in cleaning the house. And this is not a hoarding therapist. This is usually death. It's grief usually. A lot of times divorce, the D's: divorce, death, or abuse. And I'm gonna really sit on abuse. It's usually abuse. It's about 90% of the time abuse. I wish I had tracked that from day one. Yeah. And then you could break that down to physical abuse, sexual abuse, or mental abuse. And I'm gonna be honest, a lot of times I get women that are abused when they're teenagers by someone they know, and then I get them as hoarders in their 60s.
And do a lot of the people that, in your experience, do they even know that they
no, sometimes they don't.
Like, do they even connect the dots? Like, no. Obviously you're like that. Oh, this traumatic experience happened to me, and so I started.
Yeah, no, they don't. I mean, and this is where sometimes you know too much about a topic, and so you get a little, like, I get offended when people use the word hoarders, like, "Oh, my 7-year-old's a hoarder. She has 100 purses." And I'm like, right. Yeah, no, you're a crappy parent is what that means. The 7-year-old did not buy 100 purses. That means you're using stuff instead of parenting. And so, and that's never a really well-received comment, by the way, because they're looking to blame it on a mental disorder that they can't understand. Hoarding is like a fine wine, man. It is caused by years and years and years of trauma. And yeah, we don't always understand it. I mean, I had one lady, this is an unbelievable story. This lady, and this is to really understand trauma, I'm going to tell the story.
Okay.
And I'm kind of keep a lot of these clean. I mean, but it's a pretty intense disorder, y'all. And I've cleaned the worst houses, but I want people to really understand what real trauma is, right? This lady was in New Orleans, and she was in Washington D.C., but she had lived in New Orleans most of her life. And she was a really smart one, but she was young. She was in her early 40s. And this was, in the last 15 years, we've seen hoarding really get younger. It used to just be like, we thought it was like 65-year-old women with cats, right? And we thought it was 65-year-old white women with cats, really. And what we learned was that was the group of women that were willing to go on TV because they were willing to go through the shame and embarrassment to help their family. And so, like, if you get in the stats of hoarding, like, you think it's all women. It's not. It's actually 49% women. It's 51% men. But we get the male hoarders as estate cleanouts, not as hoarding. And what does that mean? That means they died, right?
I was just going to say it's the post. Yeah,
post cleanout. We didn't really early on, man. We really didn't get a lot of male cleanouts because the men would just keep it a secret. But look, hoarding affects everybody. Trauma affects everybody. We've just found women were more willing to accept, the help and the embarrassment and the shame. Top 3 careers. This is an amazing one for me. Top 3 careers for hoarding. Do you want to guess any of them?
I honestly,
well, I'll say them, and there's all right, I'll say them, and then you ask what they are. So nurses.
I was going to say something in the medical field. I was absolutely going to say something. Yep.
Teachers and social workers.
Yep, that makes sense. Okay, you have to finish the story. Go back to the story.
I'm going to get to the story. This is important. I'm going to go all over the place.
I didn't know if you zigged or zagged. Okay, gotcha.
No, and to new listeners, I'm going to go all over the place, but it'll make sense at the end. I mean, so these 3 careers, teachers, nurses, social workers, what they all have in common? They're caregivers. So you're going to find that most hoarders are incredibly intelligent, and they're really big caregivers. Right? They care for the people. And that's why this is going to blow you away. Someone's going to realize this right now. That's why a hoarder always wants you to take something home with you when you leave. Like, oh, please take this. Please take this. They're always trying to give you something. They're trying to give you something, not to clean up their house. They're trying to find their happiness and self-worth by giving things away and making you happy. Right? So it all comes back to understanding the trauma and then understanding the person. All right. So now back to the story. This woman, fascinating woman, she grew up in New Orleans. And this will again explain the trauma part. And I'm in DC, cleaning her house, very young woman in her early 40s when I'm cleaning the house. And that was 10 to 15 years younger than I was used to. And she was more like me. And I'm like, what happened? And she goes, I don't know. She says, I don't know why. She could not understand why she did this. And so that's when I started. And then literally this is 15, 20 years ago. I'm like, well, tell me what's up. We got plenty of time. Tell me what's up. And we're just sorting through boxes. And she goes, well, and I noticed she didn't have any family. And I said, look, I've noticed a lot of my clients, their partners have died or got divorced. She said, yeah. She goes, in Katrina, she goes, we were in the lower ward, and she goes, we were hit, and we stayed, and we thought we could make it. And she goes, and the water rose too fast. And she goes, and we went up into the attic, and then the water rose really fast. And she goes, I was standing up high, and she goes, my husband and my son were hanging onto the rafter. And she goes, and the water just took them, and they vanished. She goes, and I watched my son in the dark, and my husband and my son get carried away by the water. And she goes, and I just screamed. And I'm like, holy crap. I had a 1-year-old son when I'm hearing this story. And I'm just like, I can't even imagine. She goes, Matt, the hardest part is, she goes, I don't know if they died or if they made it and they chose not to contact me. She will wonder the rest of her life, did they die or did they just don't like her?
Oh my God, that's so horrible. I mean, the whole story's tragic.
It's all tragic, but that's trauma, man. That last part, that's when I was like, holy crap, we've been treating this completely wrong. We're screaming and yelling at these people when we need to be hugging and loving them because they've had trauma that we can't even understand, right? And that's why and so like, that was the day I changed it all. Like, I was like, oh, okay. Like, this is about love. This is about missing things. This is, I mean, like, now I get it. No wonder she's got all these kids booked because she just wants her damn son to come back. Right?
Sure.
Like, she was hoarding everything to fill this horribly empty, tragic hole. And I mean, I cry when I hear that. When I tell that story, I want to cry. Like,
I know.
I can't imagine. And I didn't have kids. I had 1-year-olds. So I didn't get it. Now that I got a real family, like, oh my God, I get nervous when my kid doesn't call me. Like, at pickup, right? At school. And I start to miss, I want them to leave on the weekend when they go to their mom's, but then by Sunday, I want them to come home, but she lost her kid forever and she'll never know what happened. That is severe trauma. And I can't stress. So like what I learned, like believe that day, I mean, we used to yell at hoarders. We used to get mad at them and
or judge, or just judge,
Dude.
like, oh, how could you do that?
I had another one, and then I'll get to how it changed. But I had another lady that she used to wipe feces on her door, right? She had her own feces. And I'm not holding back here, guys. The county called me. They're like, we can't even get in the house. The police can't get in the house. She's literally wiped her own poop all over the door. And I was like, I already know what that is. Let me go talk to her. So I go to her, and I have a whole technique with hoarders. You actually don't go in the house. You knock on the door, and then you invite them outside.
Oh, okay. That's so interesting.
Well, they've lost control of everything in their life. And so if you try to go in the house, you're taking that away from them. Right?
Gotcha.
And so the deal with it, we call it the vampire rule, right? Apparently on these vampire TV shows, a vampire has to be invited in. That's what one of my workers told me. And so I learned with the hoarder, same thing, vampire rule. You get them outside, you talk to them, because if you're inside, they're freaking out about you judging them and you seeing everything, and they're worried about the stuff. So you have to, if you're going to communicate, you have to eliminate everything from the stuff. So I pull them outside and I wait. I say, hey, let's go get coffee. Let's go get ice cream. Let's go for a walk. Let's talk somewhere where I can't see the hoard.
Like a neutral territory. So that,
because I got to get to know the person. That hoard is not who they are. It is to the rest of the world, but there's a real woman here. There's a real person here. And I can't get to know that person. And I'm sure not going to hear the trauma in that hoard. So you get them outside, you chat, and you waited to be invited in. Right? But this lady had literally filled her door with her own feces. And so I said, hey, come out, I want to chat. And I said, hey, that is brilliant. She goes, what? And I go, putting the poop all over the door. She goes, what do you mean? I go, oh my God, nobody's going to come in. I go, it's absolutely brilliant. I go, that's the best technique I've ever heard of. And she's like, what do you, and she's smiling. And she's like, what do you mean? I go, of course everybody's going to leave. I totally get it. I go, they're not even going to come in. I go, but when you open the door, I can see your kitchen was decent. It's not so bad. I said, but no one ever gets past the poop. And she laughed. And she goes, is it that obvious? And I go, it is to me. And she goes, Matt, no one has ever stayed. And I go, yeah, well, I'm not going anywhere. I go, it depends when you let me in.
Right.
And so then I heard her story, and she had been abused by her dad and her brother, had been sexually abused by her dad and her brother for like years. And she got so overweight, they stopped. And she said, Matt, when I knew I was in trouble, was when I missed the attention from my face. She goes, that was the only attention I got from anyone in the world. And I was just, and again, horrific story, y'all, but like, that's the point. This is real trauma that you and I could never understand. Hopefully, God willing, we'll never understand. But to your point, yes, we have to be compassionate. We have to be understanding. We have to really understand it and know that there's a real person here. I always say hoarding is a temporary disorder. It is not forever. And I have to really push that, because you might only know this person is a hoarder, but that's not who they are. They're an artist or a musician or a teacher or a therapist. I mean, they're something special. They just currently right now they hoard, and it's holding them back.
That is so fascinating. First of all, I love the fact that you said it's a temporary disorder, because I think there's also this misconception. And if somebody's listening out there and they either identify as this or they suspect a loved one is struggling with this, that this is it, period, end of story. And
you have to believe, if you are the hoarder or the loved one of a hoarder, you better believe right now that it's going to get better, or guess what? It never will. You have to, if you have to lie to yourself, fine, lie to yourself. It does get better. I promise, because I've seen it. I've been invited to 8 different people from the TV show Hoarders. I've been to 8 different weddings I've been invited to, like after they get their life back.
Oh, I love that.
What do you get a hoarder for a wedding gift?
So the approach, obviously, I don't know. What do you get? Money?
Nothing. Absolutely nothing. Exactly. They already got it. Yeah. Thank you. I thought you were going to blow past that joke. That's what
I did. Well, I started to, and then I was like, wait, because you know what? I was 3 steps ahead with my question, but then I was like, you're right. Don't get it.
Yeah.
So obviously the approach is different, right? If you go into somebody's house as a professional organizer, somebody that's like, listen, I'm disorganized. I'm a mom with a bunch of kids, and I've a lot of
that's not hoarding. That's just busy, and it's still okay, and it still might be like there's valid issues of a mom that has too much stuff. I mean, your life is still very difficult and challenging and out of control, but it's not hoarding.
Correct.
Hoarding. So I think I didn't answer this best.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, the difference between hoarding and collecting are 2 very different things. Hoarding is when these collections and these items actually harm your life or your neighbors or your family's life. You're going to lose your family, you lose your pets, lose your kids, lose your home. I mean, that's when it has caused significant trauma to you and your existing life. Collecting is something you do with your family. You have space
Gotcha.
to share the items and do things. It's positive and it's negative. I mean, hoarding is really complicated, obviously, and the approach is different. And what I will say is, after I could tell you 50 more trauma stories, I hope I've made my point.
Yes.
The point of this trauma is, it made me change my belief on hoarders. And I said, okay, so now when I get invited into a house, the rest of the world is saying, what's wrong with you? You're disgusting. You're filthy. You're horrible. But I know from my experience, this is an amazing, beautiful, complex, incredible person. And so I say, wow, look at all this stuff. You must have loved a lot of people in your life.
Oh,
Now think about that's cheesy, but
no, but
it's what I do. And so instead of saying you're filthy, you're gross, you're awful, I say, wow, look at all this love. What happened?
mhm. Yeah. And it's funny, as you were talking. So I'm a big fan of Dr. John Deloney. For anybody who's listening, he's like part of the Ramsey personalities, and he's got a bunch of PhDs. And I listen to his podcast all the time, Dr. John Deloney Show, if anybody wants to listen. Anyway, he does a lot of talking about people who are struggling with addiction, specifically drug addiction. And he said back when he was doing like in the trenches, he at one point he like flipped his perception, where it was like looking at like, oh, you're a heroin addict, you're a junkie, you're this, that, the other, to what happened in your life that is so bad that this is the escape. This is the best that you could do. And it really, and as somebody who thankfully doesn't struggle, and my immediate circle doesn't struggle with that, I was able to connect the dots when it came to where people are struggling with hoarding and whatnot, where we're so quick to kind of just make a snap decision or a snap judgment, when in reality, it's the trauma.
It's always the trauma. Always on the hoarding side of it. It's always
Correct.
the trauma.
Yeah.
I mean, so I learned years and years ago on that TV show Hoarders, they asked us to spend the night in the houses. And they said, hey, like, we want you to do this. And I remember thinking, and this was back, early 2000s. You had a time slot on TV, Monday nights at 9. It mattered. There was no streaming. And so this was just for sweeps. And I was like, guys, I don't know. This guy feels like it's for sweeps. I don't think you're actually doing it for the hoarder. And they're like, totally. Of course it's for sweeps. And I remember talking to the producers, like, I don't know, man. I talked to my lawyer. He's like, don't do it. I talked to my therapist. She's like, do not do it. And all the therapists on the TV show refused to do it. And so that tells you something, right? But then they came to me and they said, hey, we really want you to do it. I remember going through the whole thing and I said, hey, there's absolutely no amount of money that I'm willing to take to do this. And then about 10 minutes later, we found out actually there is a very specific amount of money you can pay me to make me spend the night in a hoarded house. And so I agreed to do it. I had 2 kids and I was like, yeah, man, that's a lot of money. I'll do it. And so, and I've learned,
camera, I need to know what that amount was for you.
Sadly, it was $500, right? Like this is so long ago. I mean, that was an enormous amount of money for me. And still, look, if you gave me $500, I would take it right now. But like back then, that was like, I mean, that was my mortgage. It was my rent, so like that was everything. And it changed my life to do it. So I agreed to do it, but I went into it for the wrong reasons. One, I thought I knew everything about hoarding. I've been cleaning houses for like 10 years, 5 years by myself, and then 5 years on TV. I thought I knew everything. I mean, I'd been on the Tonight Show, right, with Jay Leno. Like
I was going to say Jay Leno,
yeah, with Leno, yeah, it was really cool. I thought I was everything, and so I get there, and I did it for the money, which is always the wrong reason. If you do something only for money, it's never going to pan out.
Yeah,
and especially in our career, you got to do it to help people. If you're not helping people, it's always going to fail.
Yep.
So I agree to do it. There's a point to the story, so bear with me. I get in there, and I thought I knew everything. I'll never forget. Take a little hint. All the camera crew's gone. And the key on this was I had to spend the night. They didn't get paid if I quit. But I was like, I'm not going to quit. And so I go into this hoard, and I've cleaned probably 1,000 houses at that point. I got this little camera. I'm walking around. The lights are going down. The sun's going down. And it's a normal hoarded house. I see everything. I see this, I see the hoses and I see the pots. This lady was in the gardening. I'll never forget, in the middle of nowhere, South Dakota. And the house was normal. It was about 5 feet high. and I find a little place that I can like snuggle into. I found that in the light because I knew the electricity probably didn't work because there was rarely water or electricity in a lot of these houses. And so I find a place I know I'm going to say, I'm taking video, I'm doing everything I got to do. And I'm just like, well, I better settle in for a long winter's nap, right? Like, let's do this. And I'll wake up the next morning all good. And so I get in there and I lay down and everything's fine. And I'm like, I just got to fall asleep. And falling asleep is not a problem for me. I fall asleep in about 2 seconds, right? And so I'm kind of just looking around and it's getting dark. It gets really dark and it's got to be 2 or 3 hours at this point. I get in bed around 8. I'll never forget. And I go to bed at like midnight. So I'm like, I'm gonna get a good night's sleep here. So I'm looking around, and all of a sudden, like it's getting hotter, getting really hot actually, and then sweat's coming off my forehead, and it starts to come down my face because there's no AC, there's no light, no electricity, and the sweat starts to feel like spiders, and I know that it's not spiders, but now for the first time in my life, I understand the other part of hoarding. It's the nighttime, it's the unknown. It's the, oh my God, what it could be this, right? I know it's not, but it could be a spider, right? And then I'll never forget. I'm moving around, I'm trying to figure it out, and my leg gets caught on that garden hose. I know it's a garden hose, but maybe it's a snake.
I was just going to say, but maybe it's a snake.
Maybe it's a snake.
So your mind's playing tricks on you. Your at this point,
mind is playing tricks on you, and I never understood that part. Right? I never got that. And the amount of trauma that you go through at night and and then I started started moving around and I was on a pile about 6 feet high and it actually caved in and I start rolling around kind of like in like flannel pajamas inside of a t-shirt sheet, a bed sheet. Like it's like a straitjacket. You cannot get out of it. And so now I'm in this house. I've lost my camera. I've lost my light. I've lost my bearings. I don't know what's up, what's down. I finally realized if I drool, I'll find out what way is down.
Oh my gosh.
So I start to drool and I'm putting spit out of my mouth and I'm like, the water, okay, this way is down. And like that, cause I'm in like a Star Wars trash compactor thing. And I'm freaking out, man.
But you're like buried alive at this point.
I'm kind of buried alive. And I'm like, you know what? The money's not worth it anymore. And I'm like, screw this. If they fire me, they fire me. I got 2 young kids. I was doing it for the money for my kids. But then it's like, well, if I'm dead, my dad had just died. I'm like, if I'm dead, I'm not really a good father, and $500 isn't enough to raise my kids. I'm out. So I quit. I walk outside. Camera guys are still there, man. It's like 11:30. It's not even midnight yet.
Oh my gosh.
And I did it 7 more times, and I never successfully completed it. I quit every single time. And the reason I'm telling this long, crazy story is you have to understand the trauma that they go through. And it's basically if you've ever taken a red eye,
I just took one. Right? It's horrible.
Worst. And I'm like in first class drinking and I'm like laying down and it's still I'm like, oh, you don't understand how bad my life is. First class red eye is the worst, right? And I don't even care about those poor people back in coach.
I was in the back with the cattle. I was in the back with the cattle last week.
But like I'm joking, but I'm not. Like it's so hard. And I realize hoarders take a red eye every night for sometimes 10, 15 years. So I started to understand hoarders even more. It's like, well, that's why they don't understand time, because you and I have our daytime. We have a morning time. We have a nighttime. Hoarders timeline started 10 years ago and it just never really stopped. And so that's why like a hoarder gets, when you're like, hey, I'll meet you at 9, they don't really understand that because they don't have those time references that you and I do. And they're always exhausted, always catching up because their mind is working 24/7. It never stops. And the trauma builds each day and it never goes away. And so it is an unbelievable pile of trauma and just like exhaustion, and it mixes all in. And that's why they quit, because it's too much, man. And I never got it until I did. And then every experience like that, it was like, holy cow. Like I always say I'd walk into a hoarder house. I'm like, why are they sleeping in a bathtub? And this comes back to your heroin comment. Like, because that was the safest place in the house. Like that was their best option that day to escape everything else. And that I've never done heroin, but I'm guessing that's what that's like, right? Like it is addiction. And I'm pretty open about this. I mean, I have an addiction. I was a gambling addict. I lost everything when I was a kid. That's how I got into this. I mean, I've been open about it in my books. Like I owed a bookie $40,000. He beat me up, broke my nose. So I get the addiction side of it. I mean, I was going to rob a bank. Like that was my option to get out of this. And luckily I didn't, but like I get the being willing to do crazy things
Sure.
because of an addiction. But I was lucky enough that back then you had to either gamble in Jersey or Vegas. Like that was the only option, and then I went through recovery and got my life back together. And ironically, I got really addicted to clean and hoarded houses. I mean, that is what saved me, because for me, there was very similar addictions. I got all in, I got busy, I got to help people. The high of helping people was much greater than the high of winning or losing in gambling. But I understood the addiction behavior just like hoarding. And again, it was trauma too for me. I mean, I was all trauma. So I get it. Yeah, I get it all. And now I'm all about compassion and understanding and love for these.
So I have a couple questions.
Yeah.
And I love all of this, right?
Yeah.
And I love all of it. So my first question, and this is like strictly even my own curiosity. Do you find that the people who hoard have a particular, like they hoard a specific thing? Like we hoard gardening, or we hoard clothes, or we hoard like, or is it more of a generalist? Like we accumulate a lot of things. Like,
no, there's always an angle. There's always a grift, really. Like I'm going to get my happiness through this. So if it's yarn, it's making blankets for babies to make them feel. It's always the punchline is always, I'm going to get my self-worth and happiness from more of these, or I'm going to sell these things on eBay, or I'm going to make a museum. Like there's always a way to make their personal self-worth higher. And so, yeah, it does go to that. I will tell you, the items often match the trauma.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I was one. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I had a doll lady. Oh my God. I mean, tens of thousands of dolls. And she was so nice, and she was so good at like making it look like her life was wonderful. And we were just like, she's a pro, man. Like this is high level. Like this is borderline insane. Like what's going on here? And she had set up, her daughter's bedroom was covered. It took about 2 days to clear the pathway to her daughter's bedroom. We opened the bedroom, and the bedroom is like Pompeii. Like it's been left, right? Perfectly. But there's dolls everywhere. And she's recreated her adult daughter's wedding with all these dolls in the bedroom of her adult daughter where she grew up. So it's already, I got a super creepy feeling, like all the eyes are looking at
you. Could see if people on YouTube, my face, I'm not trying to judge. I just have this image in my mind of walking into a room of like a staged doll wedding. It's a
staged doll wedding, and husband, wife, grooms, brides. I mean, the whole thing, but it's her childhood bedroom. And I'm in there with the daughter, and she grew up in this room, and I go, wow, this is kind of creepy for you. Like, what does this make you feel? And I go, what was your mom like at the wedding? And she goes, yeah, my mom wasn't invited to my wedding. And I was like, holy crap. Trauma, y'all. It's trauma. It doesn't always match, but often if you understand it enough, it does.
So I know we're not going to be able to unpack this in this amount of time, right? We need days or months or years.
I hope this is either the best or worst podcast I've ever done.
No, I love it. And forget it. I'm not here for the $500. I'm here because I'm interested in this. So where do you, once you can identify the trauma, like let's say you have somebody that's like, I know where the trauma comes from, or I figured it out.
So
like what is,
yeah, for
what
me,
are the tactical things?
The best goal is to find that out before you start cleaning.
Okay.
Because like right there, we were like, okay, we got to pause. You got to go to therapy for all of that.
Ah, okay.
And we're not therapists, man. And I will tell you, therapy has changed. All right. When we started this, it was only CBT, which is cognitive behavioral therapy. Sit on the couch, tell the doctor your feelings. It doesn't work for everybody anymore. And by the way, good luck finding a good therapist right now. Talk about one of the most
for real.
I mean, and I'm not digging on therapists. Like, good for you, man. You're making your money. There's just so much demand, specifically with teenagers. There is the teenage mental health pandemic issue is insane. It's very hard to find a good therapist. And so I will say things I've encouraged are there's some good workbooks out there. Volunteering is an absolute amazing form of therapy for hoarders, believe it or not.
Okay.
Getting them involved. So like if their thing is knitting, get them involved in a knitting group. I'm just giving an example. The volunteering is because getting positivity in their life and getting back into the mainstream and getting to know people.
And showing that you have a purpose. Because I think that
So
you're
a
bringing
lot of
value. Yeah,
So
for sure.
like with her, I was like, I mean, we were able to get her to therapy because we had one of the best therapists in the country right there that day, and so that helped, right? But like, you just never know. But it's unethical as a cleaner to keep going because it's not going to succeed until they go to therapy. And so I just tell everybody, like, you got to get to the trauma first, and
Right.
then really sit in that. And I'm talking 6 months of therapy. I'm not talking they'll go, well, I went last week and everything's good. No, it's not.
Right.
No.
I worked out one time. I'm in shape.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like,
Yeah. Right. If you got to lose 100 pounds, you're like, well, I went for a 20-minute walk. Okay. Did you lose 100 pounds?
right.
Same thing.
Yeah.
Okay. The other analogy is if your uncle's an alcoholic and you throw away his beer, have you fixed it?
No. Well,
No, you just pissed him off. You just made it
Correct.
worse. Same
Yep.
thing with hoarding, right?
Yep.
So you got to stop and do the therapy. And I just can't stress it. And if someone's willing to clean it, then it's wrong.
Right.
It's just wrong. They shouldn't agree to clean it. They have not good cleaners.
Even if the hoarder themselves says, I want help. Like, what if the hoarder
Sure.
says, I want help? I don't want to live like this.
Say, great. Prove it by going to therapy first.
Okay.
I'll come back in a month.
Great.
And if they're unwilling to do that, then I promise you they will not make the successful clean out decisions they need to. It is impossible to cure hoarding without some sort of therapy. There's a RFMD or RMD.
EMDR.
EMDR is by far the most successful form of hoarding treatment because of the extremeness of my clients. I'll say, I mean, I'm not doing the level 1s, level 2s. I'm doing level 4 and level 5. I'm doing extreme trauma, extreme hoarding. And so, believe it or not, back to your first question, are they aware of it? A lot of them don't even know what trauma they have.
Right.
And that say it again,
EMDR.
EMDR, I always get it wrong. The EMDR is the best therapy that enables you to really access stuff that you don't know in your head. Basically, all it's strobe light therapy is the best way I could dumb it down.
Yeah, it's like I'm going to look up what is it? Does it stand for like eye movement? It has to do with something.
It's rapid eye movement. Yeah.
Yes.
But if hypnosis actually works now, y'all, I'm telling you, there's some hippie stuff you're going to think is crazy out there, but it does work. And so just don't think that there's only one type of treatment out there, but you got to find something that helps you get better.
Yes. It stands for eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. That's what EMDR
I would say
stands
the
for.
more extreme hoarding.
Yes.
If you can't see the floor, if you can't see a window in the house, that's what they need.
Right. But now, is it also, because then some people will say, is this like a learned behavior? Like if you grow up with somebody that's a hoarder, does that mean because you associate stuff?
I compare it to smoking. Right? Like I grew up in the South, so everybody smoked. Right? I mean, I lived in Richmond, Virginia. Everybody worked for Philip Morris, and you actually got a pack of cigarettes every day. You got it for work. So if your parents smoke and they smoked all the time, you either totally smoke 2 packs a day or you don't smoke at all.
Right.
Same thing with hoarding. Now that example is aging out because people just don't smoke like they used to. But I promise you either avoid it like the plague. It's kind of like CrossFit, right? You either think it's the worst thing ever, or you think, which I do, by the way,
right?
You think it's amazing and you go do it.
Don't ask me to do a box jump, people. I'm going to tell you now.
Yeah.
No, but I think that's also very helpful. Like, again, if you grew up in the household, it doesn't mean that you're destined for this. You still have a choice that you.
No. So I get this all the time. My mom's a hoarder. My grandma's a hoarder. Am I going to be a hoarder?
Yes.
No, not if you do the work, but that's the key here, man. You got to do the work, and the work is therapy and then cleaning. And anything that's going bad in your life, let's make this bigger. Anything that's going bad in your life, if you're not willing to do the work, it ain't going to get better. And then now let's insert depression and anxiety on top of that, right? And by the way, a lot of my clients are bipolar, depressed, manic depression, bipolar, and then often like COPD or some kind of other physical disorder. So okay, I'm going to tell a woman that has anxiety and is depressed and is bipolar, hey, did you choose to do the work today?
Right.
The brain doesn't work that way.
No.
A depressed person can't choose to get better. They're depressed. Right. Now I'm not depressed. I don't get I don't get migraines, so I don't understand how they work. I'm a very lucky guy. I'm pretty healthy. I'm crazy, but I'm pretty healthy, right? And so I can I can make decisions on how hard I'm going to work, but a lot of our clients can't. And so, yeah, you just have to understand they have to get in some type of therapy because like, great, if they've got depression and hoarding, now you've got to treat the depression
Oh,
medically, and
yes.
then you got to do the mental therapy when they're in a place where they can, and now you start the cleanup. And so I'm saying, like, if I've got all of that, I'm not even going to touch that house for another year.
Yeah.
But does life allow that time?
Right. And like, are there things that you could do to try to get them to, because you're like drinking from a fire hose, right? So if you're continuing to, if you're in therapy until you get to the point where you can recognize the behavior, the unhealthy behavior to
Yeah.
change it, you're still consuming more stuff, whatever that stuff is. So there's still that influx of coming in. Is there any, like, I don't know, I guess the key here is you just really have to get a therapist, and a therapist that understands this, I would
Yeah.
imagine, not just
Yeah.
any therapist.
I think the good thing about one good thing about the TV show is it's brought awareness to the disorder as a whole. It's actually a protected mental disorder now. I mean,
Yeah.
I've had families that were going to get evicted, and we've been able to help them actually fight that, because it's actually considered discrimination against mental health to kick them out because of hoarding. And it
Wow.
depends on the progressiveness of the state to acknowledge that. But it is part of the DSM-5 now. It is a protected mental disorder. You can't just, now if you rent, it's a little different because you've ruined the property. But if
Right.
you own the property, I mean, there's all types of things. I mean, I could go into 10 days of conversations on this, so how to get help. Let me tell you what you shouldn't do.
Okay, go ahead.
Don't do a mass clean out when they're in the hospital.
Got it.
A lot of families do that. Oh, mom fell. We're going to clean it up while she's in rehab. And she comes back home and the house is empty, and you're thinking, she's going to say thank you. She's going to be so happy. We fixed the problem. We fixed the problem. And what happens is it's another trauma. They feel like they got robbed. And so now you've put another trauma on top of all this other trauma, and they're going to fill that house up so damn fast.
Right.
And so the other real disclaimer is don't do the forced, like, if you want to see your grandkids, you have to clean your house.
Don't
no
threat.
threats.
Yeah.
Because that's not actually what you want. You want mom to get better so that she can see the grandkids.
Right. Absolutely.
So don't put yourself in a situation where you have to then now take your kids away, or worse, you've set this threat, and now mom, it didn't work, and now either you've got to pull the trigger and pull mom away, or you're a wimp and you didn't do it, and she now knows this doesn't work. So you failed either way.
Exactly.
Threats always fail in hoarding. Always.
Don't
do it.
I have one more question that's a little bit on the other side of things, because as you may know, we have a lot of professional organizers who also listen to this show.
Yeah.
So are there certain people that, like, this is above my pay grade kind of thing? Like, I am not qualified. And I had actually a conversation just the other day with one of the two of the organizers that are in our partner program.
Yeah.
And they said that they suspect that a friend of theirs is a hoarder, but had asked them specifically to come in and help, and asking me kind of my thoughts on it. And the first thing I said is, you have to be really clear if this is something that is above what you're capable of doing.
It's
because
not for everybody.
Yeah.
Like, let me answer that reversely.
Yeah.
Guess what I hate doing? Rich white women's closets. I won't do it.
Yeah.
People are like, you should go on the home edit. I would be insane if I was on it. Great show. I love what it's done for people and for organizations.
For sure.
It's not my style, man. I need dead cats. I need 20 boxes. Like, I need the gross stuff. That fits me. Like, I'm lucky I found this 20 years ago because it fits my personality. You need what you need as a professional. Know your limits. I mean, and I can tell you the only way to know is to take one on and then you fail. And now you've hurt the person even more by trying to help. If your brain is telling you, I don't think I should do this, don't do it, because it's going to be awful. And it's like, the only thing it's like that old, if you ever had a job you didn't like, it's that Sunday night feeling like, oh God, I got to go to work tomorrow morning.
Yeah.
That's how we feel as organizers when we have to go to a job we don't really want to do. There aren't enough organizers in the country, I'll say that, to do all the different jobs, but there's enough work out there where you can relay it to another professional that is good at it. I use a company, SteriClean. It's a good company. They're trained by Corey Chalmers, who's the other guy on Hoarders. I think he's got about 50 franchises around the country. Don't quote me on that number.
Yeah.
If you're thinking about doing it, hire that to be your clean out crew, because that's all they do every day.
Right.
And then you can be the organizer on the job and decide if you want to do it. But a lot of times I would not take it on by yourself unless you're sure. And this goes for family too. I think family is too close to it. You're angry about a lot of stuff, usually something that happened when you were 16. There's no way, and you're 65, by the way, there's no way you can be objective now.
Oh, yeah. Oh, for
then
sure.
the trauma gets uncovered. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've heard, we get 10 days into a clean out and they're like, well, if you knew dad was doing that to me, why didn't you stop him?
Mm-hmm.
Oh my God. I've 100 times I've heard that. And it's like, like, how do we move forward? And like, well, let's pause again for therapy. Right. And by the way, none of us are therapists. I have yet to meet a professional organizer that is also a therapist.
But I think it's important that they be able to work hand in hand, because on the flip side, therapists are great and trained in their skill, but it's a beautiful compliment.
That was the beauty for being on Hoarders. I always had one of the top 5 therapists in the country literally standing right next to me. So I would say something and be like, you can't say that. Why not? Because of this. And then we'd have a conversation with the Hoarder. And none of that ever made the show. But like my first really 10 years on Hoarders, I literally had Dr. Zazio or Dr. Tompkins next to me. By the way, when I got into hoarding, I read Dr. Tompkins' book, right? Like that's how I understood hoarding. And now 10 years later, I'm sitting with them in a house, cleaning a house, right? And so we would run and be like, well, I'm thinking about doing this. I'm thinking about saying this. Like, no, don't do that, because this will trigger this. So like, that's where a lot of my processes were from being able to work side by side in a house with the therapist. And if we didn't have the issue, I mean, there's just too much need. Thank God there's so much awareness of mental health now.
Yeah.
But we're so far behind in the numbers there. And so I think it's really challenging to get that. And hoarding is not curable yet. I mean, it's like AIDS in the 80s. And I'm not trying to compare it to AIDS. I don't mean to disrespect anybody, but like now you can take a pill, right? Like I'm not trying to disrespect anyone with AIDS. I'm just saying time goes on and you find ways to treat things better. Hoarding is the ugliest disorder in the world. Nobody wants to touch it. And so we don't, and
people don't even want to talk about it. And people don't want to talk about it unless it's sensationalized. And again, I'm not shaming your paycheck for all those years, but I think again, to really truly have people understand and look at it, like you said, I think shining a light on again, the trauma that is behind it.
Well, and I will say, this is why I do podcasts like this. I do go back and forth. Did I help more people or hurt more people by doing that show? I don't know. I still kind of go back and forth on it. I currently justify it by saying more people are aware of it. More people are getting help because of it. But don't be like on the wrong day. I don't know, man.
Don't be like the woman from Katrina. Don't be wondering. I mean,
I'm too big. I mean, I got my own family at the end of the day and I'm slammed, and I'm not talking about money. I'm saying I do get enough thank you letters from people that it makes me believe we did good.
Yes.
But I'm trying to acknowledge that some people hate that show. It was sensationalized, but I will say, I know we definitely helped get hoarding acknowledged as a mental health.
100%. Absolutely.
And so I can go to bed at night with that. But I was on reality TV for a very long time, and that's something you have to live with forever.
Well, listen, I think you do a lot of good in the world, and you really, from where I sit, you've helped and continue to help a lot of people, and you're really one of the good guys, Matt. And I love how I love just your approach and everything, like you said, and I'm a big storyteller too. And I love that everything really relates back to the story and the people.
If you are compassionate and empathetic and listen to the stories, and then I would throw in humor. Humor is a really important tool, because when you're at rock bottom, there's really no other, you can't like shame someone at a rock bottom. You gotta laugh and say, yeah, dude, believe it or not, I can't tell you how many times I've told the story of a bookie beating my nose in. And the Hoarder's like, oh, that's awful. Like, I know. She's like, ooh, I feel bad for you. All right, let's go get, and it gets them out of their depression, because they're like, woo, I was not that bad. Like, shame on you. I mean, I've had literally Hoarders be like, Matt, I feel bad for you. And they give me a hug, right? But like, and I don't want to open up a new can of worms, but that's why a lot of my guys are ex-cons, believe it or not. That's on purpose. I have a lot of guys on my hoarding crew that did significant time for real crimes. I mean, 20 plus years usually. And because they understand isolation better, they understand forgiveness better, they understand everything that a hoarder has to go through. And I've had guys that work for me if you've never heard of Ronnie's a guy that's worked for me for 20 plus years. He did 20 years for prison.
Wow.
And he did 20 years for murder. He's the best hoarding cleaner guy in the country. Like, he is the best because he understands isolation better than anyone, because he was in isolation for a year, and he's been able to work with hoarders better than anyone. So the point of all of this is compassion, understanding. Dude, none of us are in a place to judge anyone.
Nope. And nobody's above redemption. That
No.
also clearly.
And everyone deserves a chance. So love
Yes.
them. I mean, my God, thank God. I mean, let me tell you something. Go ask my family members how it felt when I had to call everybody, ask them 40 grand. They sure didn't think we'd be where we are today.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And some of my family still thinks. I called my mom this morning. I said, Mom, I need a favor. And guess what I had to say right after that?
It's not money.
It's not money. I am 47 years old. I have 7 kids. I have a couple houses. I still have, every day I have to tell my mom, I'm not asking you for money, because for the rest of her life, she will think I'm asking for money because of something I did when I was 21 years old.
Well, I will tell you a quick side story, and it's like, I don't mean to make it morbid, but we've had like a fair amount of trauma with relating to death in our family. If I text my older daughter who's in college, no, all I have to do is, hey. Yeah. If I just type the word, hey, her immediate response is, who died?
Yep. I still
feel
that way.
And it's like, and I mean, I can even do, I have to be like, hey, no one died.
No one died.
Exactly. And I'm like, and I look back, and it's really like, unfortunately, like, there's been you could see the breadcrumbs that have led to that. So
let's sum this up. Hint to anyone that loves a hoarder and is communicating with them. This is how I want you to communicate. Hi, not about hoarding.
Boom.
If that's your lesson today, we both, look, our daughter and our mom, we both saying the same thing, right? Sometimes it's not about what you say, it's how you say it. And if you really want to help a hoarder, it's how you say it. And you just gave it to us, Lori. It's, hi, this is not about hoarding. Wait for a response and then start to talk to them.
Love it. I literally just wrote this down because I'm putting it in the show notes. Matt, you're one of my favorites. We're going to take one quick break, come back, put you in the hot seat for our wrap-up questions, and sit tight. All right. Before I let you go, tell everybody, and of course, we'll link it all in the show notes, where's the best place for them to learn about the stuff that you're doing, books, speaking engagements, all the things?
Follow me online at IamMattPaxton.com, IamMattPaxton.com, or any of my social media is I am Matt Paxton. If you need my book, Keep the Memories, Lose the Stuff, just get it on Amazon.
Such a great book.
Thank you. I'm really proud. It's helping a lot of people.
I actually would show it, but I lent it to somebody. I lent it to somebody, and I'm like,
my new favorite thing is people bring me the book to sign it, and there's a bunch of tabs and underlines and stuff, and it means they're using it, and I love it. So if you need help, get that book, and then, or just go to the library if you need it. But end of the day, that's it. I'm taking a year off, man. I'm just gonna be hanging out for a couple weeks this summer with my kids. So I love it. Yeah. That's awesome. So just, if you need, just love somebody, man. It sounds so cheesy, but like, anyone that needs help, I've got 15 years of content out there. You can find it online, YouTube, whatever. Come find it. Listen to these podcasts, and I'm taking the summer off to hang out with my kids.
I love it. Yeah. All right. Wrap up questions for our newbies. And I know you did. I don't remember what you said last time. Book recommendation. What are we recommending these days? Transformational book, or a book that you're currently reading?
I can tell you what I'm currently reading right here. Die with Zero.
Ooh.
So I work with a lot of people that have saved very intelligently. I've never been in a place in my life where I was just trying to get to zero most of my life. And all of a sudden I've been able to, like, I've got 7 kids to prepare for. So I'm 47, and I spent a lot of time figuring out what my next 30 years look like, because what I have seen is the people that plan for it. Doesn't mean you have to have a lot of money, but they plan for it properly. And you can really take care of your family, properly, and set them up to succeed if you start planning around 40. If you never think about it, man, my dad left me with bills. Like, straight, I had to pay for my dad's funeral, like, legit story.
I always say, I don't need an inheritance. I just don't want to have to be left picking up the tab.
So I heard this guy on a podcast, and it's a really good book, Die with Zero. It just means you're intentional.
I love it.
Of course, my wife's book is really, really good.
Yes. And we're going to link up to all that, because I'm a fan of all y'all's stuff. And then right now, and I feel like you have it all together, but in this particular season, and you have a lot going on, where do you feel the most organized and where are you feeling a little bit of a hot mess?
Organized is I'm a really good dad. That's where I'm
Love
killing it
that.
right now. Yeah,
I
I love it.
absolutely love that.
I mean, it took me a long time to get here and I've worked really hard and I've done the work. And so I'm a really good dad and I feel it right now. And that's great. And I love that. Where am I a mess? Man, email and text. I'm horrible at it. Let's see, you'll laugh at this. I have over 17,000 unread emails.
Okay, but how many of those are really ones that you need to respond to?
Probably 2,000.
Okay.
I've got 683 unread texts.
Oh my God, that's a lot.
It's a lot.
Holy
People are like,
moly.
oh my God, when they see, they're like, oh my God, what happens if someone needs you? I go, well, they'll try again.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
I've just justified it, but I'm not, there's people that are important to me that I don't reach out to because of that. I'm overwhelmed. So I'm currently, my wife and I are really working on just doing the bare minimum in life and just getting back to like putting family first, us and me and her first and ourselves first, like working out every day. But the point of all that is like getting rid of all these emails, getting rid of all these groups, getting rid of all this extra crap you don't have to do. I've really learned to just streamline and make my life intentional. But it started to me with email and text, believe it or not.
Yeah, I love it. Actually, this is totally, they're not even a paid advertiser. There's a company that reached out to me and I was trying them and I'm actually trying to work a deal with them. But at the time of this recording, not paid. Clean.email. And you can go in there and you can set all, and you might be able to do all this through Google. I don't know. I haven't taken the time to do it, but you can set up all of these like rules and filters. So like for me, I have a lot of unread emails because I don't delete regularly, but like I set up a filter. If it hasn't been read in 30 days, delete it. You know what I mean? Like anything unread, delete it. And my inbox, okay, I'm going to tell you right now, my inbox right now has 847 it has 847 unread, which is a lot for a lot of people. It used to have about 20,000 unread.
Yeah, that's where I'm at right now. All right.
I'm telling you, look at clean.email and it really, again, because it just takes, you just put in some filters and you're good.
I'll say this. I really do think I'm doing the best I can do. And I hope people listening feel the same way.
That's it.
Right? Like if I didn't return an email, I don't think God's going to be like, dude, you didn't get that email back to somebody. Like you're out. You don't get into heaven. Right. At the end of the day, man, I'm doing what I can do. And if you really
selfishly,
need me, you'll find me. Yeah.
And selfishly, I'm like super flattered because you emailed me pretty quickly after I reached out to you for this.
This is a good podcast. I love being on it.
Love it. I love it. All right, Matt, I'm going to let you go. It's always a pleasure. Check out all of Matt's stuff. This has been a great episode. I can't wait for it to drop. And I'll catch you soon. And if
awesome.
This is your
I'll be back again.
I'll
see you guys in another couple months.
You got it. All right. See you guys. Peace out.
Thank you.
I'll see you next week for another episode of This Organized Life.